set up here on the table with different components from the insides of the AUG, and we're going to talk about the stock components and compare them to a few aftermarket offerings from our company, Arid, Armament Research and Industrial Design. So come in here, we can see the stock components that are laid out, and we'll just go ahead and identify them. We have our original trigger slide, safety, trigger pack, and linkage. The components we offer in regards to these will cover the trigger slide and the safety. Start with the safety. So when you get components from Arid, you're going to have the sticker. It's got a label with the contents inside. In this case, we have the two safety options for the STEYR AUG. One of them is patterned very similarly to the stock safety. Here's the stock one, here's the new one. You can see it has a full channel pass through for the trigger to fully travel for semi-auto and full auto use, and it has the undercut there for the trigger linkage to pass underneath for assembly. So the difference between the two of these is the stock trigger is only right to left, safe to fire, engageable. Our trigger, it can be engaged from right to left for disengagement, or if you flip it around, from left to right. So for you lefties out there that shoot with the left hand, you can now press in from the left side to take it off safe for firing, and the trigger stem won't be touching your fingers or anything like that. So it's absolutely an ergonomic improvement over the stock trigger. The second, sorry, not stock trigger, the stock safety. The second safety that we have is a over travel stop safety for semi-auto only. The way that works, so if you can see the stock safety right here, you can see the pass-through channel. When it's on safe, it's oriented like so. When it's taken off safe, it allows the trigger to pass fully for semi-auto and full auto. Ours, on safe, it acts the same way, but off safe, it only travels far enough for it to release the hammer for semi-auto fire. So what that means is even if you don't have a Ratworks sear installed in your trigger pack and you're still experiencing over travel with your stock trigger pack, you throw this in, that over travel is governed to stop by the safety itself. So it's a mechanical stop similar to how it is in the trigger pack, it just happens in a different location. So again, this is also reversible for ambidextrous use. Pretty easy to install. We're going to go ahead and do it right now on this here STEYR AUG. Again, leaf spring, two hooks facing down into the notches, the V facing up to engage with the detents on the safety itself. So, just to show you the left-handed use, I'm going to go ahead and identify. There's a little X carved into the sidewall of the safety and a bullet icon also carved into it. X is safe, bullet is fire. We're going to install it for left-handed users, left to right, right to left. There we go. So right now it is on safe, now it's on fire. Put it back on safe. So that covers the safety modifications that we have. Now we're going to look at the trigger. So the stock trigger has one contact point to engage the linkage. Over time, as people fire their AUGs, whether it's semi or full auto, that contact point, or this nut, will become loose, or the plastic jaws that clamp down onto the linkage itself start to wear or lose material just from heavy use. What that means is now the linkage can start to work itself free and no longer be engaging the trigger pack. That's not something you want to find out while shooting the AUG. So we did there's a few other factors that we redesigned to this, but that's one of them we addressed. The trigger that comes from us, Arid trigger, it's the improved trigger. You get the one trigger plus the set screws that are inside to help adjust it. And it comes with a desiccant packet in there, so it sits for a while. Those steel pieces of hardware don't corrode. When you take it out, the set screws are pre-installed, but they are not calibrated. It's really important to understand. They are not calibrated. You have to do that yourself as you put it in your stock. There's enough variations between old generation stocks, new generation stocks, that even the slightest adjustment in this will make it work or not work. So you have to calibrate it yourself. I'll show you how to do that. So if we zoom in here and take a look at the two different triggers, immediately we're going to see some differences. One on the right is plastic, on the left is also PLA plastic. We will be making these out of aluminum or a high density polymer of better durability than 3D printed PLA. Right now they are just a mechanical proof. You can use them for shooting range use. Would not recommend heavy use or betting your life on this trigger to function for thousands and thousands of rounds. We'll still cover replacement if you break it, but just want to say that because this is a very functional prototype, not full production model yet. Differences we have are in the basic geometry and the structure of the trigger itself. The one we offer is absolutely more solidly built. There's less flex, felt movement, or play in this trigger. In the nose and on the top, we have the final set screw. We'll talk about that in a second. And we also have in the nose on the bottom a ball bearing set screw, which allows this trigger to glide very smoothly inside of the stock channel. And then we have geometry and holes that are present for the stock nut and bolt to be engaged for reassembly. So what we're going to do is we're going to install it on this STEYR AUG, and to start we're going to remove pieces and pre-assemble this trigger. Reassembling this trigger consists of first removing the bolt with the washer, and then we need to pry out the nut that's in there. So we just get a screwdriver or something small and pry that sucker out of there and set aside our stock trigger. Now we have the nut. The nut has a special shape. One side is wider than the other. The narrow end goes in first. The tolerances on this recess inside this trigger are loose enough where if you tip this down after some install and use, it can fall out. So just be aware of that. If it falls loose in your stock, it's not a big deal. You can shake it back out, but just orient your rifle in such a way that that's not going to happen. Let gravity help you. So keeping this generally face down, the nut's inside the back. We also have the bolt that is going to engage that later. First thing we want to do is make sure that the linkage itself can actually freely go inside of the trigger itself. When I print these off, I take a file to the channel on the inside and I make sure it's nice and smooth so that you have no issues or binding as you're trying to insert or assemble the linkage into this trigger. So this one is properly filed and the tolerances are good, and we can see that it moves freely inside and out. Key to note here, the contact points for the stock nut and screw, it's designed the same way as the original, which is to twist this down and clamp the linkage at this location so that it's fully locked in. This final set screw is not meant to be a clamping screw. All that it is supposed to do is reach down. It's in there pretty good. Oh, because I took the nut, the screw in there. Gotta take that bad boy out of there. All right. These two flats that are on the linkage bar, this set screw is simply meant to contact and engage those flats. So if for any reason this side fails, you're still going to be able to press and pull your trigger by that set screw engaging those flats and pulling it to the rear. So again, it's meant to be contacting and slightly snug down, not super tight, otherwise you will crack the housing of the PLA as shown here. You can probably see that white line. This set screw is torqued down way too hard and caused it to crack. It still functioned, still fired, no problem, but we want your part to last without cracks. So on the aluminum models, absolutely you can crank that sucker down all day long. The aluminum will be able to take it. So, all right. The last thing to cover on this is the ball bearing adjustment screw. If this screw itself is too far advanced down, then you're going to have a massive amount of friction built into this trigger. I'll show you how that works. So inside the stock, probably hard to see. I don't know if you can see in there. We have this notch hole right here. Nope, can't see it. All right, no worries. How to explain this? As you view the inside of your stock, where your trigger is seated, look where I'm looking right here. Straight down to the nose of that inlet, that channel, you're going to see a small rectangular opening which the tongue of the linkage is naturally going to go into. That's where the tongue rests and prevents the trigger itself from going up and down and falling out of the stock. It's how it interlocks. When this ball bearing set screw is advanced too far down, it's poking out the bottom, it causes the tongue of this linkage to rise and then press itself against the material in the stock, which makes the trigger completely useless because now it's friction locked inside. If the ball bearing is too far recessed, meaning too far in and not sticking out far enough, it's going to be a perfectly functional trigger, it's just you're going to have a lot of slop. The idea behind the ball bearing is to have it adjusted just so that the ball bearing is gliding on the bottom shelf of the stock, but not causing friction on the tongue as it glides in and out of the stock channel. So hopefully that made sense. Rewind and play it back. I will show you how to adjust it here in a second as we do the install. So parts are out, nuts installed, set screw is already retracted slightly, and the ball bearing is just barely poking out. We're going to see that for a starting point, see if it's good. So, all right, on safe, I'm going to go ahead and orient the stock properly. Got my trigger here, slide, putting it into the stock. It is absolutely natural as you're putting this in to feel resistance on the way in. This trigger itself is slightly oversized with some raised surfaces to improve tolerances. We don't want any wiggle or any shaking. In this case, it went in pretty nice. Hard to see, but as you inspect this part, you're going to see raised surfaces here, here, and here. And the same for the other side of the trigger. If there is any reason that this will not track forward and backwards, then you just take a knife or a sharp edge and just shave one pass, one pass, one pass, do the same to the opposite side, put it in, test fitment. Once you get those tolerances right through however many passes you have to do, then you're good to go. So as I'm putting this in, my weapon's on safe, you are going to feel resistance as you press into the stock. That is okay. Don't sand anything down, just push it in until it is in its position. Now it's in position. I'm going to take it off safe. So now the trigger can travel. And what I want to feel is little to no resistance at all, which this one has almost none. It falls with the force of gravity. I just shook it a little bit to overcome that normal force. But, that is pretty smooth, and I'm going to leave it as is. You can also feel the ball bearing working very, very nicely up there. It's a very smooth glide, and it drastically improves the felt movement of the trigger. So I'm going to call this one good. No adjustments, no shaving necessary. It fits well in the stock. I'm going to put it back on safe and continue assembly. To continue assembly, it's just like we showed earlier in one of the other videos. I'm going to depress the bolt release up so it stays in that position. I'll take my linkage, find the slot, drop it in, give it a little help with my finger. There she goes. Now it's starting to engage the trigger. Make sure they're separated inside the mag well. And now I'm going to, again, use my index finger pressing against the rear face of the sear. Engage the two flats. And, I'm sorry, the tail. And now pressing through. I can already tell, yep, this guy is too far down. Basically what's happening is I'm trying to press in, the nose of the tongue of the trigger linkage is now touching the front of this channel, and it's not aligned perfectly with that slot. So I just fired my hammer or trigger pack, so I got to reset that hammer real quick and do that off camera. And that's good. We're going to continue with assembly. So back on safe so this guy doesn't move, and now we'll take our reset hammer pack, separate the linkages so they're pressed against the sidewall of the magazine well. Good to go. Engaged. Back to the sear. Pressing forward. And I've got full seating forward. I can see it through the hole there. So I'm going to reassemble the takedown pin. Now the trigger rat's isolated. That's good to go. And now we're going to put in this pin. We might get lucky here. Alright, I'm feeling resistance. It's starting to clamp, so I'm going to do another half turn. And good to go, engagement on there. Now we're going to go ahead and engage the last set screw. It is a 1/8 drive. And again, the thing we're trying to feel here is just when it touches the linkage, and you'll notice. Go in, boom, found it, another quarter turn. That's all we're doing. No torquing that guy down, at least not with a PLA plastic. So that's fully engaged. Let's go ahead and reassemble and do a functions check. Very nice. So up and down movement is mitigated. That ball bearing is now set, as we showed before. Right now the weapon is unsafe. It will not fire. So if you're left-handed, not going to move. So now you can do the whole ergonomic sweep. So off safe, and then you can fire the weapon left-handed, like so. On safe, off safe, on, off. So super nice. It's for all you southpaws out there who were born wrong-handed. So sorry, life's been hard for you. All right, cool. So that's how you adjust and set that trigger up. The process of adjusting that ball bearing set screw is a little bit like the back and forth with setting the linkage at the beginning. I'll go ahead and show you how to do that just in case it was improperly set. So in order to do this, we don't have to completely remove the linkage from the stock. We just want to get it out far enough so it's no longer underneath this plastic surface here. We want to pull it back till it's just behind this first hole so we can get access to the set screw. It's a 1/8 inch drive. So in order to make this adjustment, we're going to need a 1/8 drive Allen key. We don't want one that's a bit head like this because we need it long stem to reach down to that channel and make the adjustment. So just to show you what that looks like, here's what's inside of it. So I'm going to go ahead and advance this out. I'm reaching through the top of the trigger and engaging that set screw. You can see it walking out. Probably get out. Hand tighten. That's all it is right there. It's got the hex drive right there, ball bearing on the end. It doesn't go in through the top. The top's not threaded. It's just straight wall there. But it is threaded in the bottom. So you actually have to back it in, as it were, to get it set. And then once it's engaged, reach in here with your 1/8 inch drive and bring it back for adjustment. So what we want is the metal housing of that screw to be flush with the bottom edge, so only the ball bearing is poking out the bottom edge. That's how it was designed in CAD, and it works pretty good for an initial adjustment. So what we want to do is loosen this guy, so we'll do that real quick. Loosen the primary nut. Get the correct drive here, number 3. All right, backed out. It's loosened. We actually have to take it all the way out because we need to retract the trigger linkage about 1.5 inches. So here's what we're looking for when we make this adjustment. I'm going to use my thumb to touch the top and my index finger or another finger to touch the bottom edge of this trigger. What I'm trying to do is just pinch it, and all I'm going to do is lift up and down. I'm looking for vertical play. Right now I feel none, which means one of two things. Either I'm really, really good at this, or the ball bearing is too far down, causing the tongue of the linkage to press up against the top of the stock. If there's no felt play at all, that's probably what's going on. So we need to retract this linkage and use the forceps. Keep in mind, you just remove the factory nut. So that, the factory bolt. So that nut in there, if you tip this backwards, it could fall out, and now you got to fish out the entire assembly. So just keep it oriented down, you should be okay. And we want it on safe so this guy doesn't move. So engaged. I just pulled it back far enough. I'm leaving the forceps attached. The flats you can see through the top in the middle. That's a good place to leave it. So all we got to do from here is take our drive, 1/8 inch drive, rest it down in there, make sure it's engaged, and then I'm going to retract, so counterclockwise rotation, and what that will allow the nose of the trigger to do is to dip down. And that'll eliminate that friction. So I'm going to do a quarter turn. So it's retracted now a little bit more. And using the forceps, I'm just going to push it right back to where it was. Now before, when I did that same pinch technique to lift up and down, there was no felt play. I'm going to do the same thing. Now I have up and down play. I could probably afford to advance that ball screw down an 1/8 turn. So being a perfectionist, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let's get that bad boy recessed a little bit. It's clear. Engage. Alright, fully engaged, little turn. There we go. Get a hold of the linkage again. Pressed forward. Now I'll try it up again, up and down again. Less felt play. I'm going to give it a little bit more. And all I'm doing right now is just taking the linkage out slightly, putting it back in slightly, taking it out, back in, and just feeling that up and down play. Right there is pretty good, and honestly it's so barely noticeable that for an average shooter is not going to really feel the difference. But what you are going to feel different is that ball bearing sliding inside the stock instead of the plastic sliding on the polycarbonate. So that's probably our final adjustment here. Up and down. Very nice. Alright, so we're going to call that good. Now we need to make sure that it's properly set. So our calibration technique was to bring this back slightly and engage the trigger bars, trigger linkage with the STEYR itself. There we go, seated. That's forward. Nuts going in. Number 3 bit. Alright. Tight. Half turn. Clamp is good. I dropped this guy. Alright. Change out the bit. Gonna engage my final set screw. Again, we're just advancing it down until we can feel resistance from encountering the linkage. There it is. Little quarter turn. Done. It's just all it needs to do is engage the flats. So, alright, functions check time. Trigger pack is installed. On safe. Left to right. Good. 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 On the reset. Vertical play is almost nil. I can feel it gliding against the ball bearing, and that is very crisp, very smooth, almost zero friction. So going back to the earlier video about the stock trigger components, knowing that we had mechanical flexing or bowing due to improper manufacturing or quality control with the linkage, fixed that by shaving the ends to be the same. Having felt slop in the stock trigger because the tolerances were too wide. It flexed, it was spongy, it was bowy. This gets rid of those tolerances and tightens everything up. And then the friction caused by components in the trigger pack fixed by dry lube. And then we have friction caused by the trigger in the stock fixed by the ball bearing, being the rolling component where most of that friction is experienced. So once all these parts are assembled, you have a pretty nice improvement to the controls. The last piece of control that we want to cover is the magazine release. Currently this stock is set up with a Corvus magazine release, which in my opinion is pretty dang awesome. Corvus Defensio has made some amazing products for the AUG, and we're not attempting to copy or replace what it is they're offering. We just have a different take. As far as the safety and trigger, we've actually collaborated with them on a few designs, and they've helped us a great deal, and we want to do the same for them for the work in Austria. So good on you guys. We love you, and we want to keep working with you. Their magazine release has some differences between ours and theirs. Obviously the magazine release for the AUG is going to have very similar function. It has to press into the stock to release, and to make improvements you need to introduce some over travel components and increasing the size of the shoe on the mag release. So if we can get a zoom in here, we can see the Corvus release is very nicely machined out of aluminum. Eventually we want to use that material as well. Right now it's 3D PLA plastic. But it has this concave type engagement where the wings of this magazine release jut out and start to bend downward. That's good for release. It kind of indexes the thumb and kind of catches it and forces it to center. Ours doesn't go concave, it goes convex, meaning the edges of the magazine release bow inwards. The texturing on the surface is slightly different, and the inletting on ours is slightly different as well. So we'll go ahead and take out the Corvus Defensio mag release on this stock. Pretty straightforward. Get an appropriately sized screwdriver, which that is not. Get a smaller head. Oh, there it is. Oh, good engagement. So I'm just going to back this guy out. And that should drop free on the other side, which it does, which is good. Mark any components here. Got our nut, put to the side. And now we're going to take our punch and basically just press out the screw while trying to catch the magazine release of the spring. We don't want springs and things under pressure to go anywhere. So helping this out, I'm just pressing up and down on the release to help the screw walk itself out. And I should be able to pull it out this other side. Nope. That mag spring is super strong. There we go. She's out. Got it. And here is our release. So the Corvus Defensio, when it comes from the factory with a small roll pin, which acts as a guide to not only hold the spring, but also as you press the factory screw in, it allows that pin to pass while the screw takes up that space. It's extremely handy to have for assembly. We ship ours with the same kind of a roll pin, so thanks Corvus for that innovation. It absolutely helps. The differences between ours has to do with the inletting inside the mag release. Go figure, I'm the kind of guy who may not read your instructions super detailed or with attention to detail. Not all the time, most of the time I do, but when I installed it, I installed the long tongue into this well because I saw all that space in there. I thought, the long tongue must go in that space. But one of our team consultants totally corrected me and showed me that was absolutely the wrong way. So what we did is we designed our mag release to have the short tongue inletting only. So you can only install the spring one way. So self-guided right there. So we install the spring, put the guide pin in. The guide pin is undersized, so it's pretty loose. It can actually fall out very easy under gravity. So what we want to do is make sure the guide pin stays in there with the assistance of gravity. So I'm going to orient the magazine release properly. Guide pin is so far staying good. We're going to pass it in the channel so that the channel keeps the guide pin installed. Down she goes. I'm already having a hard time. Guide pin's good, spring is out, so resetting. Again, this is a difficult assembly. Alright, cool. I can see that the guide pin is lined up where I need it to be. Screws going in. Ooh, that hurts. Alright, that spring is very, very strong. But you are stronger. There we go. Perfect. Guide pin's out, captured, nuts going in, the screws passed all the way through the hole, and now we're just going to cinch it up. So, screws in there, engaging the nut. So, something to consider. When you're reinstalling this magazine screw release, this screw and nut doesn't have a mechanical stop. You can absolutely over tighten it. And what it does is it clamps the stock to prevent magazines from dropping free that otherwise would drop free. So I'm going to go ahead and over tighten it just slightly. I'm going to see what I mean. So here's a factory stock magazine. It is in there. I press the release. It is not dropping free because I have over tightened the screw. So what I'm going to do is just slightly remove it, take it out just a little bit. The magazine release is no longer engaging. And we'll start to back out this screw until that magazine falls free. There we go. That's working. Try it with this guy. Drops free. This guy drops free. Magpul P-Mag. We'll borrow one from up here. Not prepared. Thank you, Case. Appreciate it. Magpul P-Mag. Oh, it doesn't drop free. So we back it out a little bit more. Almost dropped free. So, some inletting is required of the stock. Even on the factory magazine releases, sometimes they do not drop free with the Magpuls, but close enough. Mine it does. So, anyways, if you encounter that issue with this magazine release, it's not necessarily release. It can be because you over tightened the screw in the nut that assembles the entire thing. So, but as it is, it engages very nicely. No forward or backward rock on that magazine. A little bit on this one. Factory magazines, a little bit. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. So, we have about close to 1,000 rounds on one of our magazine releases on the other AUG that we have, and it's performing just fine. So, is it a Corvus? No, it's not made of aluminum, not yet. I'd definitely recommend the Corvus over this one until we have better materials to serve, but it does improve over the stock factory magazine release. So, in review, what is Arid offering? Improved trigger shoe, which has a very nice texture, by the way. It's not a flat face, it's actually grooved and ridged. So your finger and your knuckle naturally rest in that spot. It's got a little bit of skeletonizing styling, and the tolerances are turped out to be better. Ambidextrous function on the safety. In this case, it's set up for left-handed use, so right now it's on fire, on safe, and then the improved magazine release in the back. So that's what we're offering right now as far as 3D printed parts. And we probably get more emails about this than anything else. When is the A3 M1 top rail and handguard offering coming available? So, give you some context. We're a very small company. We don't have a whole lot of people, and we have even less capital. So the way we're going about it is we're either saving, either taking out small business loans or investments to furnish the first run of parts, which will then create a profit snowball and allow us to build even more parts. Currently what we're looking at doing is creating the control suite out of aluminum or better materials at lower initial investment costs so that we can then snowball that to pay for the top rails and handguards. So everyone asking for a date, it's to be determined. We have to negotiate the contract, find the shops, find the materials that we want, the anodizing, the post-process, and then shipping and handling to get it out to you guys. What we will not do is take any payment for any rails that do not exist. So until we make these things, you can't pay us for them because we're not an investment bank or a firm. We want to sell products that exist. So, but what it's going to kind of look like is similar to what I have here. This is an AUG A3SA by Sabre Defense, and this currently has a 30 slot top rail with a gooseneck extension. What that is the last 10 slots of what could be pick rail is flattened out to take a weapon mounted light switch, which is the natural position for the thumb to rest if you're clamping further out. The rails can go as far back as here before you start poking your eye, and they can go as far forward as your muzzle device or your own personal preference requires. Right now what we're looking to do is to create 40 slot top rails that start flush with the ejection port and end right behind the jam nut of a stock 16-inch AUG barrel. For the A3 M1s, because the M1 has the receiver hump in their castings, which you can see here, how the Midwest has to kind of jog around that hump. The A3 M1 rail is going to be as low as the SA rail, but it's going to make a slight rise over that hump to get over it to remain structurally sound, and then come back down to continue the pick rail at the same plane of reference. That way you can run an iron sight on the forward portion and on the back portion, and they co-witness, and same thing for optics going on that portion. The handguards. Right now we're deliberating whether or not to make handguards out of aluminum or a high-density polymer. The polymer in a mold form would be cheaper to produce in larger quantities and probably offer just as much protection and rigidity for zero devices that go in that portion of the firearm. Nothing's going to be stronger than that aluminum top rail, and you have tolerance stacking anytime you attach things to it. So the handguard currently is just AR-15 spec 3-float tubes remachined and cut to fit the profile of the AUG, and then mounted by M-lock slots to the top rail. So it's ingenuitive, it's trying to MacGyver a system to working, but it's absolutely solid. We have 3 screws and engagement points on this rail. It's very, very stiff, and it shoots. It's such a good solution. I really enjoy shooting this one, and it changes absolutely the ergonomics that's offered by the AUG. Traditionally, you have that foregrip, which is flimsy. You pull it down, it folds or doesn't move. You can't really brace super hard against it, otherwise you pull it down. But this here absolutely offers a very solid, rock-solid engagement point for ergonomics and improving over the standard AUG. The rail space that you have available to you is drastically increased, whether you put backup iron sights, different type of optics, or IR aiming devices, lights, lasers, things of that sort, to improve the function of the weapon. Why are we doing this? It's not to make the AUG an AR, and it needs to be modernized if it's going to stay competitive in a modern world that has newer devices and accoutrements that are used in warfighting. I am in the military. I won't disclose my job. It is not that, but I work with people who do that. And absolutely, the type of devices that people are using as mission equipment on their rifles is super critical to sharing information on the battlefield using visual cues, whether that's IR aiming devices and or signaling friendly outgoing fire for other people to match. So those kind of devices need to be mounted on a warfighting weapon. This is a warfighting weapon. It's a proven combat rifle and needs to be updated and modernized. Not trying to make it an AR at all, just trying to bring it into the new era. So I absolutely love this platform. I've always enjoyed AUGs, enjoy all kinds of other different weapons. I'm not a die-hard bullpup fan, and everything else sucks. I can see the merits of different weapons for what they have in their design aspects, but I absolutely want to see STEYR stay relevant for the next 40, 50, 60 years, and the AUG too. And I think this is the way to go. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you to Case, TnSteyr, for providing all this equipment in this space to do this tutorial. And yeah, you guys stay safe out there and shoot straight. One more thing, not a flannel daddy thing, just so you guys understand, I do not represent STEYR or STEYR USA or any of their affiliated companies in any way, shape, or form. The concepts and techniques that we've been using to assemble, disassemble, adjust are things gathered from experience working on the AUG platform and with the help of Case STEYR, or TnSteyr, Case Cook, who is a certified STEYR armorer. So his advice and help and specs are going to be shared in the links down below, with certain specs being shared, others retained unless you attend the STEYR Armorer's course. Other than that, I just represent Arid as a company, and we really enjoy the work that we're doing, developing innovative solutions to different firearms that are out there. So thank you much. That's all I got.